So Rabbi said, Perek Mem Aleph, last week, we started Perek Mem Aleph last week. We're on the first page of Mem Aleph, the second to last line, V'hinei Hashem nitzav olav. One of the Yud-based psukim. So I just want to go through here quickly. We learned a sikha last week, a sikha that the Rebbe spoke about that was connected to learning Tanya on the radio, where the Rebbe spoke about this perek. And the Rebbe explained, we didn't finish it inside, all the different steps that the Alter Rebbe goes through, what he explains, why they're all important, why they're necessary. And he explained that a person, like the goal is that a person should feel the responsibility to Hashem and to the whole world, like the significance. Like what I do is, not only is it important, but it's of ultimate importance. So right over here, we could start right away with V'hinei Hashem nitzav olav.
That doesn't make him better than anybody else. Everybody is important. Everybody's going to say the same thing.
Right. So
everybody else.
Okay. So.
But everybody's important.
In other words, that's why the Alter Rebbe brought the Mishnah that Chayav Adam Loimar Bishvili Nivra Ha'olam. So a person is obligated to see himself, like, in the Hasidic interpretation, Bishvili Nivra Ha'olam means that the concealment on godliness, Helen, that exists is for me to overcome and to reveal, to show that it's Hashem. And he brings the pasuk V'hinei Hashem nitzav olav by Yaakov Avinu. And there's a medrash that says that the Goyim, they are sustained by their gods. Their attitude is that their gods sustain them. And with the Yidden, it's the opposite, that Hashem stands on the Yidden, that we it's our, like, what we do matters to Hashem in the ultimate way. Just like when Adam Arishon was created, his actions determined all of creation. In other words, when, like I said last week, when Adam Arishon said, "Come, let's bow," everyone, all the creations recognized Hashem. When Adam Arishon sinned, it affected the whole world. So there was no one else to shift the blame, so to speak. He carried the full achrayus. So we as individuals, the intention is that we should see ourselves as responsible for everything. And like what the Rambam says, and the Rebbe discussed like this idea at length, how even a child could understand. Like if you present a child with a scale, right, with two plates, the youngest, even a little child will understand that the tiniest amount of advantage, that if you put even the smallest thing on one side, it's gonna tip the scale. So even a single action could tip the scale of the entire world. So V'hinei Hashem nitzav olav. So Hashem meaning like Yud-Ke Vav-Ke, page Nun Vav, we're still at the second to last line. The rest of the world, what brings the world into existence? Only the glory of Hashem, not Hashem's essence, Hashem himself. And Umabit olav, Hashem is looking specifically to this person. Again, the word nitzav is like that sustains him, like a preservative. What gives Hashem his kiyum? What gives Hashem his strength? That when the Jewish people are doing what they need to do, we say Ein Melech B'loi Am. Uvaychen Kloyes V'Leiv. Not only is Hashem there, but Hashem is watching not only our externals, but also our internals to see what's happening in our heart. Im oivdei koroi, if we're serving Hashem appropriately. Now, so the Alkain. Therefore, tzarich lave lefanov be'ema oveyira. A person should serve Hashem with awe and with fear. So there's a general theme that's with regards to Yira, and it keeps on coming up in this parak, from many different angles. Basically, love is self-serving. I feel good. Sometimes parents have a hard time seeing it, but someone else will tell parents, "Oh, your children are here to serve you." Like if your child doesn't live up to, so that you're embarrassed by them. One of these, they had this Zoom, a 3-hour talk with Yossi Jacobson and this rabbi from England, Shimon Russell. And
he's very famous with kids working.
Right. And he describes, I don't know if he's talking about himself or it's a big Rosh Yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael whose a daughter went off the derech, and like he went to pick her up in the airport, and she was standing there like not sneeze, speaking mildly, and this Rosh Yeshiva or whoever it was embraced her, and all these people are standing around. They're like, right? He's just trying to
Be a good father.
He had to. So the way he was expressing it is just to get over your, be there for the other person, not about your child fitting into your plans and your, So with Ava, when we say, "Oh, I love Hashem," so if I love Him, it feels good for me. It's satisfying my love. It's all about love. Without Yira, the service part is only Yira based. The idea of Yira is bittul. Tell me what to do. You know what I mean? Like that position of bittul is very, very important. So Hashem is the king. Hashem is standing and watching us. So the Alkein Tzarech, we have to stand before Him like someone standing before a king. Now, so this was presented as a hisbeinenus, as a meditation, as a meditation, as a hachona, as a preparation to serving Hashem, to doing mitzvahs. When we start our day, this is what we begin with. V'yamik machshavazu, a person should think deeply into this idea. V'yarich ba, should prolong the thought. Kifi, I think it's time to get a new. It's not working any. The weight is. Kifi, not to use a sefer. Okay. Kifi yecheles hasagas meiche umachshavtei, as much as he's able intellectually. Ukefi apnai shaloi, and depending how much time he has. Yeah, lifnei esak atayra a mitzvah, before he learns Torah, before he does a mitzvah. Kamei lifnei levishas talos utfilah. So even though fear of Hashem is a constant mitzvah, it's a mitzvah tmidis, but nevertheless, specifically, particularly before a person does a mitzvah, so this should be a thought. I'm doing this mitzvah as a servant. Hashem asked me to do it. I'm His subject. And I do what He tells me. I do a mitzvah. I learn Torah. Why? Because Hashem told me to do it. And He says as an example, before learning or before Talus and film. Now comes the second. The Alter Rebbe is going to give 3 layers of meditation in preparation of. Right, so in the beginning of the parak, the Alter Rebbe said we have to remember that Yiras Hashem is the foundation. One of the things that I didn't mention last week is that the Rebbe is always looking for the simcha part. Even in the Yiras Hashem, he's also looking for the simcha part. So the Rebbe says, why does the Alter Rebbe say that fear is the beginning? Because it's not the destination. The destination has to include joy. So it's a reishis or avodah, but it has to be simcha. So that's where the Alter Rebbe started. He says a person should at least think about, even if you're not going to feel it, even if you're not going to experience it emotionally, you should think about this idea that the Eibishter is the king, Mamalik Alamin, Seviv Kalamin, and he's Miyached Malchusay on the Yidden, that everything else is secondary. Really, the agenda is the Jewish people, and V'olav Bifrat, and you specifically, etc. Now the Alter Rebbe says, when a person is getting ready to do a certain mitzvah, so there's another layer. Remember that what is a mitzvah? A mitzvah is Hashem's will. And now you're going to fulfill it. That means that my neshama, the way it's experiencing physical life in the body, is dedicating itself to Hashem. Meaning, the essence of my neshama is altruistic. The essence of my neshama is batal to Hashem. But the neshama that's in my body could negate Hashem. They say the story, there was one of the great Hasidim that right after davening, he had to travel somewhere. So he hired a coachman. I finished davening, I'm going to go. The rabbi was a little older. In those days, the roads weren't so smooth. Some of the roads in Russia aren't so smooth today either. But anyway, the coachman is right. He's leading the whatever the right word is. He's coaching the wagon, and the rabbi keeps repeating to himself in Yiddish, "Ich ker ze chiber." I'm turning over, and the driver feels terrible, and he keeps trying to avoid the potholes, and the rabbi keeps saying, "Ich ker ze chiber." Then when he finishes, he gets to the destination. His rabbi, it was such a bad ride. He says, "What do you mean?" He says, "You kept saying that you're turning over." He's like, no, I was talking about my animal soul. Meaning that during davening, I saw godliness as the center of my world. And now I'm going back into the world, and I feel like the world is so attractive. I'm getting like this becomes important to me again. Why can't I hold on to what I was doing during davening? So the essence of my neshama, that's pure. But when a person does a mitzvah, what they're doing is the neshama that's in the body, my consciousness, is doing what Hashem wants. So here the Alter Rebbe is going to express that. What am I doing now when I do a mitzvah? I am serving Hashem in my body. V'gam yizbayna. Ech she'er ein seif baruchu, haseviv kalamin, u'mamale kalamin, hu ratzon ha'elyon. Hashem, the essence of Hashem, seviv. Right? The power behind everything, which is the will of Hashem, who melubish ba'esius v'chachmas ha'Torah. That what is Torah? Torah is Hashem's will. Oy b'tzitzis utfilin elu. These tzitzis, these tefillin, what are they? They are Hashem's will. Now, the tefillin are Hashem's will even when they're on the shelf. The Chumash on the bookshelf is also Hashem's will. But Bikri Yosei, when I read it, Eibil V'Shasei, when I don tefillin, Humamshich Eirius Baruch Alav, I'm bringing it into my life. I'm aligning myself. What am I doing? I'm doing what Hashem wants. Dehainu, what is Alav? Not on the essence of my neshama. Al Chelek Alekami Mal Shebetoich Gufay, on the part of the neshama that's in my body. Likolel v'libatel ba'erius baruch. I'm doing what Hashem wants in real life. So that's the second layer. Now the Alter Rebbe says there's a third aspect. In other words, be cognizant, think about what you're doing. Be mindful, you're doing a mitzvah. Hey, I'm doing a mitzvah. I'm doing what Hashem wants. Right? Not to be by rote, not thinking about, whatever, I just do this matter of fact. I'm giving tzedakah because I want to be a nice guy. I'm doing it because Hashem commanded me. Now he goes deeper. V'derech prat. Every mitzvah has a particular thread of connection with Hashem. He says, v'derech prat. B'tfilin, when a person puts on tefillin, what he should be doing, if we're fulfilling the mitzvah 100%, is that the person is dedicating his brain to Hashem. The person wraps tefillin around his head, and he says, I will only use my thoughts to think about Hashem and to fulfill my mission in this world. Exclusive use. Okay, we don't make personal phone calls. You know what I mean? Like, you have a job, like you're using resources, you take home paper clips. No, like, you're completely dedicated. I'm focused on what I do. So b'tfilin, when a person puts on tefillin, libatel v'lichlel b'chinas chachmasei ubinasei shebenafshi holikis, to connect his intellectual faculties, b'chinas chachmasei ubinasei shelein seif baruch hu, in Hashem's wisdom. Hamalubosh is derech prat, which chachma of Hashem is in kadesh li kol b'cher. Kadesh, the word kodesh, relates to chachma. And the second parsha, V'hoya ki v'yacha, includes the questions. Remember, we say every day in Rabbeinu Tam's, we say, V'hoya, it will be ki yish'olcha bincha, when your child is going to ask you the questions. Questions are in Bina. When we're processing, developing ideas, that's where the Bina is. So the parsha V'hoya ki v'yacha, which is one of the parshas in the Tefillin, is Bina v'hainu. What does it mean? Sheloi lihishtamesh b'chachmasei u'b'inasei shebenafshei bilti la'Hashem levadei. I want to take a minute here to highlight something. When we speak about such, and I'm sorry, everyone's sitting so politely, well behaved and quiet. When we speak about things that are so personal, like the Alter Rebbe is really getting inside, so different people have different experiences. For some people, like they're revolted by this idea. What do you mean? I have my own identity. I don't understand what this means. Well, what do you mean? I'm not allowed to think about anything else. What is this? It's oppression, religious oppression. What's going on? And there's also very much like the culture that we live in is very, like it teaches people selfishness, like just to, it's like, even like the whole expression to be in touch with your feelings. Like think about from the Tanya perspective. To be in touch with your feeling means that your feelings dictate. It's such an absurd notion. Like the whole Chabad is that what do you mean? You guide your emotions. You're not in touch with your emotions. Like my emotions are going to tell me what's going on for me. I'm speaking a little bit in black and white. And I know obviously it's more nuanced. But if a person is focused on a goal, right? If a person they want to attain something, and they keep on being distracted by silly things, it's like, there's something that I really want. So I'm going to clear away because this is for my own interest, I'm going to push aside all these things that are getting in the way, and I'm going to dedicate myself to this end. You know what I mean? Like, you just choose one, in however it plays out. If somebody really wants to, what? Give me an example. If somebody really wants to, what? Give me an example. If somebody really wants to, what? Give me an example. If somebody really wants to, what? Give me an example. If somebody really wants to, what? Give me an example. If somebody really wants to, what? Give me an example. If somebody really wants to, what? Give me an example. If somebody really wants to, what? Give me an example. If somebody really wants to, what? Give me an example. If somebody really wants to, what? Give me an example. If somebody really wants to, what? Give me an example. If somebody really wants to, what? Give me an example. If somebody really wants to, what? Give me an example. If somebody really wants to, what? Give me an example. If somebody really wants to, what? Give me an example. If somebody really wants to, what? Give me an example. If somebody really wants to, what? Give me an example. If somebody really wants to, what? Give me an example. If somebody really wants to, what? Give me an example. Okay, somebody wants to win the Olympics. So whatever obstacle there is around them, they don't want things to get in the way. So if we have a focus, like what is the purpose of my life? The purpose of my life is to serve Hashem. That's like the greatest possible, like what is the purpose? To serve me? But what am I supporting here? Like what's my life? What's my tachlis? So then, I'm going to harness my mind to think about ways. I'll just give you another silly example. A week ago, a little whatever, we had a Zoom, Fabring and Mechanchim were talking about different things that the Rebbe shared about chinuch. And one of the ideas that emerged is that instead of a person who's in education fighting with individual kids to try to get them to conform, use the same exact energy to help every child feel special in participating in what we do. Right? In other words, one kid is the gabbai, and one kid is the whatever, in other words, find the same amount of energy. You're telling this kid, sit down, and that kid, be quiet, and this kid, just the same energy. Use it to help every kid find their niche within, not that they should feel, oh, I'm stupid, that's why you're making something different for me. No, we're not making anything different. You're in the system. So all the energy, so whatever, in our mind, what are we trying to do? To feel special outside of Hashem. You know what I mean? Like, the greatest achievement of a person is to be matzliach in serving Hashem. So every thought should be, whatever we do. Why do I have a job? Because I have a responsibility to. So then, whenever I think about my job, it's also about Hashem. Alter Rebbe continues, I'm sorry for the digression. V'chein, so too. Libotel v'likolel b'chines hadas shebenafshe. We have 4 parshas in the Tefillin. So Chochmah Bina, and then the 2 aspects of Das, HaKoilel, Chesed Gvura. Shehein Yira v'ava shebelibay. Our emotions, b'bchinas Das ha'elyon, to dedicate our emotions to Hashem. In the parshas HaKoilel, Chesed Gvura, HaMelubish, b'parsha Shema, and in V'hoyim Shemaya. Parsha Shema is v'yohavta to love Hashem, and V'hoyim Shemaya is Yiras Hashem. Hishomer lecha, pen, don't stray. Im Shemaya tishmu, you'll obey what Hashem says. V'hainu, says the Alter Rebbe, this is not a Kabbalistic idea. This is the way it's spelled out. What are we supposed to think about when we put on that tefillin? To harness, to focus our mind and our heart. We bind our hand. We bind our hand to say, my hand is not free to do whatever it wants. Right? Imagine a society where everyone does whatever they want. So now, we're in a society where people they hide. Everyone does whatever they want, but they hide it a little. They're making it a little PC. No, l'chatchila, let's do the right thing, l'chatchila. Every once in a while, I tell the story. I was at a kinnus, one a year, but the kinnus hashluchim, and one of the rabbis said, he says, a kid in my community, a 15-year-old kid, came to me. He says, Rabbi, stop sending me your weekly emails. So I said, why? He says, because in your emails, every week it starts with a joke, the joke of the week. And this week, the joke was about an elderly person. He says, one day I plan to run for office, politics, and I don't want they should see that I have a joke about old people. So don't send me the... Right? Someone's focused. So l'shavet alev ha'meach now. So the Alter Rebbe spoke about the particular idea of tefillin that I'm harnessing my mind to Hashem. Uba'atifas tzitzis, when a person wraps himself in the talis, yechavein, he should have in mind, k'meshikosu b'zoyah, lahamshich olav malchusa yizbarich, to draw upon himself Hashem's kingship, asher malchus kol elam v'chulu, leyachta aleinu al yedei mitzvah zu. Oh, there's a typo here. Leyachta aleinu al yedei mitzvah zu. So here there's an interesting detail. He says, what is tzitzis? It's when you put on a talis, you enwrap yourself in the talis. It completely envelops you. That's like Hashem's kingdom. It's all encompassing. So when you do the mitzvah, what am I doing? I am embracing Hashem's kingship. But there's a problem. That's the theme of the whole parak. In what way the Alter Rebbe is trying to say that tzitzis has a unique connection to Hashem. What's the unique connection? That Hashem is the king? That's what you've been telling me the whole parak. So the Alter Rebbe says, there's a big difference between someone who meets a king who's already a king to someone who's there to coronate. You take a person that's a citizen and you're making them the king. So now think about it. Here's a person who has no feelings for Hashem. Hashem is not a king in my life. Now when I put on the tzitzis, I'm going to say, you know what? I am now coronating. I am making Hashem the king for me right now. So that's a difference with tzitzis than all other mitzvahs. Mitzvahs represents a person who doesn't experience, even someone who doesn't already experience Hashem as a king, who turns around and says, I now want to accept upon myself Hashem as my king. And that's the idea of Soim Tosim Alecha Melech, appoint a king over yourself. I also want to mention, we have a halacha that a king cannot forgive their honor. Right? Melech shemochal al kveidei ein kveidei mochel. A parent could be mochel you. You could say, here, you could sit in my seat. Talmud Chacham says, when I come into the room, you could stay sitting down. You don't have to. Don't give me maftir. Don't worry. But the king, you can't do that. Why? Because the pasuk says, Saim Tosim. Which is, in other words, if the king is mochel on the kavod, you have to anoint him again. You have to keep on accepting the kingship. It's a layer upon layer. So even if one, anyway. Now the Alter Rebbe goes back to the beginning of the chapter. Ve'azai. At that point, even if he won't experience actual fear of Hashem in his heart. In other words, he won't experience an emotion. Mikol Mokaim, nevertheless, Me'ach Hashem Mekabel Olav Malchus Shamayim, being that he accepted upon himself in action the yoke of heaven. Umamshich Allah. In other words, he's doing what Hashem instructed him to do. Umamshich Olav Yirasi Yizbarech Biz Galus Machshavtoi, and he's thinking about Hashem's kingship. And it's Uritzoyne Shebemoicha, he is willingly thinking about Hashem as his king. In other words, it's not like someone who's going to say, in my heart, I'm a good Jew anyway. Okay, I did meditate, I didn't meditate. No. I meditated. I resolved. I made a resolution. I like the word resolution better than achlata. Because achlata sounds like something we're not going to keep. A resolution is resolute. I'm going to do this. Whatever. This is it's my problem. Like it's a heskem. In Hasidus, there's different expressions. A heskem, it's a decision. It's not achlata. It's a decision.
It's like you had No, if the guys decide that it's gonna be $5, not $4 or $6.
So right, so there's an agreement. There's a heskem between the two people. There's a heskem. Here, right, anyway, here's where we tell the joke. Mark Twain said it's very easy to quit smoking. He's done so thousands of times. Right? So in other words, there's some times that you take something on and you know that this is it. It's done. So this Kabbalah, the Alter Rebbe says, yeah, I know you don't experience an emotional reaction, but the decision is clear. I will do what Hashem wants. So me'ach Hashem mekabel olav malchus shamayim. And he accepts Yiraseh Yizbarech Bizgalos Machshavte. For Kabbalah Zuhi Amitis. You're not being, some people are very concerned. I don't want to be a hypocrite. Right? Sometimes a person will say something very not nice. We were speaking about the Shabbos by the Fabrengen. That sometimes when people are truthful, they're angry. It's like that little kid when he's chutzpahdik. He kept it in the whole time. And now, once you cross the line, he gets angry, and he starts telling you all the things that he really thinks about you the whole time. Why? In order to be honest, you have to be angry? You're right, you understand? Mm-hmm. Right? Husband and wife, they're arguing, and they're always being polite to each other, and then at a certain point, they're like, you know what? I had it. Let me really tell you. Right? And suddenly, so I'm being honest and I'm angry. But could we be honest and not angry together? In other words, someone says, I'm being a faker. I'm doing mitzvahs, I don't really mean it. Alter Rebbe says, no, don't. You don't know what you mean. In other words, Kabbalah Zuhi Amit is Belishum Safik. There's no doubt. All of us know that a world without Hashem is chaos. All of us know in the back of that if we're signing up for the jungle, that's a world without the Eibishter. It's a mitzvah b'lishum safik. Sharei hitev an nefashos kol Yisrael. It's inborn. It's in the DNA of every Yid. Shaloi limrid b'melech Hakadosh Yisbarach. Not to go against, not to rebel against Melech Hakadosh. Melech Hakadosh means we don't weigh. This mitzvah, maybe that mitzvah. In other words, I'm religious, but certain mitzvahs I don't keep. We're weighing. That's not, when we recognize Hashem as the true king, we don't weigh. Whatever Hashem says, we do. So when a person takes this in his mind, that when a person learns afterwards, or does a mitzvah after this decision, those mitzvahs are nekrois b'shem avodah shlema. They are considered true service. I did it for Hashem. I was mevatel myself. I did it because Hashem told me to do it. I did it because I didn't do it for me. I did it for Him. I didn't do it for finity. I did it for infinity. Like any service of a servant to a king. On the contrary, if a person learns or does a mitzvah only motivated by love, to embrace Hashem through Torah and mitzvahs. In other words, what does he want? He wants connection. He wants attachment. He wants to be close to Hashem. That's not called being a servant. That's not called service. And the Torah says, Va'avadetem es Hashem Elokeichem. The pasuk says that we are obligated to serve as a servant. There's another pasuk, ve'oisei sa'avodu. The Torah instructs us twice. The first pasuk is in Chumash Shmos. The second pasuk is in Chumash Devarim. I mean, obviously, we're talking about, ve'oisei sa'avodu in the end of the parsha there. So we have a chiyuv. So here there's a delicate thing. The Zohar says in Parshas Bahar, Kahai Torah like an ox. The Yahavin Allah oil the kadmisa. We place first a yoke on the ox. The yoke is not only there to make sure that it doesn't gore. It's not just there to restrict it. It's there le'aft begin so that la'apoka minei tav la'oma, to bring out goodness. We are harnessing the power. We're not limiting it from sinning, from causing harm. Things are going to grow. It's going to yield. Hachanami, so too with a human being. Itzrich lebar nash, a human being must not to avoid them doing averis, but in order for them to do good. You see what he's saying here is that Yiras Hashem is necessary for Asay Tov. If it's not Yiras Hashem, it's selfish. If it's selfish, it's not Tov. A quick digression. When a child has a bris, we say, Kishem shenichnas labris, ken yikanes, the Torah, ulechupa, ulemasim toivim. So the question is, what kind of order is that? Torah, marriage, and good deeds. Good deeds should have been first. A young child could do good deeds. Masim toivim, Torah, and then chuppah. So one of the answers, it's a pshat, is that Masim Tovim means selfless acts. Like it says, it's no good for Adam to be alone. Loi Tov. Loi Tov heyesa Adam levadei. What's Tov? Tov is when you have someone to do for. So Torah chuppah, only after chuppah is there a possibility for Masim Tovim. Right? So here, what he's saying is, in order to bring out goodness from a person, meaning selflessness, you must have Kabbalah soul. Because if it's only motivated by love, it's self-serving.
And my Kabbalah soul is you're also like very low in emotion.
Yeah.
You're afraid of go, you're kind of afraid, policeman.
We're talking about the Hashem.
Yeah.
Kabbalah's oil of Hashem. Because there you're being mevatel yourself.
Yeah, Kabbalah soul means harnessing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Ira, how it goes to
I think you got here right after we discussed that.
No. In other words, the Yira, last week we spoke about the Yira and Kabbalah soil, the two parts. In other words, I'm afraid. Therefore, I do what I need to do. Right? I don't stray. We're not talking yet about levels in Yira. I'm afraid of Hashem.
You want to make call to friend, so you make call. You want to talk to Hashem, you put feel on tuxedo.
No, because then I want to talk. I have an agenda. I am a Hashem's servant. Who am I? Hashem said, I said, Avram. Vayomer hineni. That's it. Hineni. Whatever Hashem says, Nasa v'nishma. I'm a soldier. Whatever we need to do today, we will do.
I used to say to myself, I was younger, I used to say to myself, it sounds crude. It is crude, though, just to get up. It's his bat and his ball, and then he'll play by his rules.
Good. Okay, it's not crude. Good, I like it. Yeah, good. Ve'i hai lo yishtakach gabei. If a person doesn't have Kabbalah's oil, lo yishar yabei kedusha. There's no holiness there. The word kedusha means something holy. Holiness means beyond us. The word kadosh means removed, greater than. What does the word holy mean? What is holy? Something beyond us. Ava is not holy. Holiness only becomes possible when there's Yiras Hashem. Yeah. I've said this different times. I don't remember the exchange exactly. But Reb Mendel Futefas was talking to one of my classmates, one of my friends. They were talking, they were having a nice one-to-one. So Reb Mendel said, he says, Reb Chaim Reutblatt, we have the Reutblatt children here. He was a Yid with Yiras Shamayim. So my friend says to him, how do you know? You're a prophet, you have Ruach HaKodesh. How do you know who has fear of heaven? And he was like, from when he was a young man, he had fear of heaven. So Reb Mendel looked at him, he's like, you don't have to be a prophet. Here, look, I look at you. I know you don't have Yiras Shamayim. Anyway, that was yeah. So, it's the Perek opened, this is the foundation of being a frum Jew. Yeah. Obrayim Mehem Nesham Daf Kuf Yud Aleph Amud Beis, the Zohar says, Shakol Adam Tzarech Liyos B'Shtei Bechines U'Madreges. Every person has to constantly live in two realities, to be Hashem's servant and Hashem's child. Bechinas Eved Bechinas Ben. In other words, there must be the Avdus part. There must be the service, the servant, in order to truly bring Hashem into our life. And what this says is that you could have someone who learns their whole life and davens their whole life, but there's no kedusha. Of course, it's a mitzvah and it's holy, and like I mentioned, I'm telling too many stories, no? Like that Maisa with the Alter Rebbe that I told many times, that the Hasidim, the Alter Rebbe one day was laughing during Shema Keleinu, in the middle of Shemona Esrei. And after davening, they asked him what happened. He said, today, a Chassid passed away. And he grew up as a child. He had a friend, a Misnagid. So on the way to Gehenna, he passed Gan Eden. And his friend who predeceased him was in Gan Eden. And his friend says, you see, I'm in Gan Eden. So the Chassid turned around and he said, you're such a misnagid. He says, even if you'd be in Gan Eden 10 years, you still wouldn't know that God exists. So the Hasidim used to learn pshat in the story. What does it mean that on the way to Gehenna, you're passing Gan Eden? So they said, like what he's saying here, if a person davens and learns for selfish reasons, but his whole life he only did mitzvahs. So where does he go? To Gehenna? He goes to Gan Eden. But it's a very low level. It's a low level Gan Eden. It's a Gan Eden, but it's a low level. And that's what he's telling him. Even if you would remain here for 10 years, it's still driven by love, self-love. This is how you feel good about yourself. You learned another Blat Gemara. It's not about the Eibishter. It's good. You didn't hurt anybody. You didn't make the world a bad place. But there's missing Kedusha. It's missing Hashem. Even though there's a higher level of a son, someone who loves Hashem, who's also completely batel, like Alter Rebbe explained earlier in Tanya, at the end of Perek Yud, that a child loves their parent more than they will do more for their parent than for themselves. He's not saying that's for every child. He brings an example. What's a chassid? Hamischasedim koine. Right? In other words, right? Imagine just in a simple example, imagine someone has two opportunities to work in business. One is to help their parent, and they're going to earn $50,000, and another is to work for themselves, they're going to earn 100. Many people would sacrifice the extra money just to help their parent be successful, because they love them, they want them to be successful. So I know it's a very stark example, 50,000 to 100,000, but in other words, this is livable. Or people tell me all the time, I live in a certain place. Why? Because I'm near my parents. I don't like this place. I don't want to live here. But I'm here. They need me, whatever. So people make sacrifices for their parents. So you have a person that their love is so great that it's not self-interest. I love the person that I abandon all my interests just to help them. That's a different kind of love. That's the Ava Rabbah. He says to reach that level, it requires the higher level of Yira, which the Alter Rebbe doesn't go into because we're in the Sefer Shel Beinanim. This is not the Sefer of Tzaddikim. Let's read another few lines. So the two dots, and we continue. Afni, even a person, Shagam b'meichei u'machshavta, in his brain, in his mind, einei margish shum yiro busha. He's not ashamed. He doesn't feel shame. He doesn't feel awe. Because his soul comes from a low level. It's not spiritually sensitive. From its place of origin. What is the world of Asiya? The world of Asiya focuses on action. What I do. Says the Alter Rebbe, Afal Pikein, nevertheless. Since this person's service, the intention is to serve the king. Harezu Aveda Gemura. This is considered complete service. Even though he does not have Yira, but he has Aveda. Ki Hayira for Aveda Nechshavis L'shtei mitzvahs b'minyan taryag, because the service and the awe are two separate mitzvahs. Ve'enan ma'ak v'zu azu. You don't. Without awe, without fear of Hashem, you're still serving Him. Ve'oid. But I want to tell you, says the Alter Rebbe, shebe'emes mekayim gam mitzvahs yira. He's also fulfilling the awe of Hashem. B'mashamam shechayira b'machshavtoi, with this above mentioned resolution. Ki b'shah v'reba zu al kol panim, because while he's thinking about this, meira shamayim alav al kol panim, the fear of heaven is upon him. Kemeira basar v'dam hedyot lefachis, like the fear of a person. She'ene melech hamabit alav. If somebody watches us, we don't want to sin. I don't want to get caught. In other words, I understand what the world expects from me. I don't want someone to catch me stealing in a shop. Not because I'm afraid that I'm going to be arrested. I'm going to be embarrassed. When I put something in my pocket. Somebody's watching me, I'm ashamed. Shenimna ba'avurei melasis dava she'eni hogam be'inav. I don't want to do something inappropriate. That person's going to look down at me. Shazu nikra yira. This is also considered fear. K'mei she'amar Rav Yechanan ben Zakkai le'talmidav. Rav Yechanan ben Zakkai said to his students, Yehi rotzim, may it be Hashem's will. She'yehei meira shemayim aleichem k'meira basar v'dam. Halavai, that you should fear Hashem like you fear a human being. They said, what are you talking about? He says, Teidu, I'll prove you right. When a person sins, he says, Adam, no one should see me. That's what he's thinking of. Actually, so at this time, when a person makes this resolution, at least he has that basic Yiras Hashem. Okay, I'll just we'll leave it here. We'll continue from here next week. I just want to highlight this Indian for a minute. In our language, we talk about foxhole prayers, right? You know what it is, a foxhole prayer? They say as long as there's algebra in schools, there's going to be prayer in schools. Verstehst? A foxhole prayer means somebody who's stuck. And he's asking for help to get out. In other words, imagine if I am tempted, someone leaves money, and I want to take the money. And I'm looking around to see if there are cameras. And I want Hashem to help me. I'm afraid Hashem should help me steal. I could also ask Hashem to help me not steal. Hashem, help me do your mitzvah. It's a shift, right? Instead of asking Hashem to protect you from other people catching you, ask Him to protect you that you shouldn't do the wrong thing. And that's the shift. The first, in a strange way, the foxhole prayer is a prayer, like kids tell me, wish me luck on my test. And I'll get mean when they say that. I'm like, I wish you that you're going to get the grade you deserve. Right? In other words, love is driving the fear. Why is the gun of davening to Hashem? First, he's self-serving. Yireh Shamayim is, I want to serve you, Hashem, help me. Why did you put this here? Why am I being tempted? Help me overcome this challenge.
Never happened, because it could be wrong solution, a policeman comes. Stop you from stealing. Like to praise the person should be strong, No, don't do it.
The person should be strong, it never happens?
No, you should not download it, because Hashem will send you a test.
Al Taviyenu, we say Al Taviyenu, but when we're confronted, it's such a shift. That's where it is. It's right there. That's where that's what it all hinges on, that change. And it's something also to teach children. Ask Hashem to help you be Aymed bin Isayim. Anyway, we're going to stop here for tonight.